Welcome to Reason for Truth. I'm your host, Stevie Garofalo, in studio today with my good bud, Tony Casella. And he is the propeller. He's going to be with us today. We're going to talk about, Italy, Italians at Christmas. How do Italians celebrate Christmas? And it's like an event like none other, man. You know, listen, turkey's good, all that stuff, but Italian food, that's where it's at. Welcome to Reason for Truth. I'm your host, Stevie Garofalo. Here at Reason for Truth, the truth comes first, the reasons comes last, but we're always and constantly learning. Because listen, when we stop learning, we stop teaching, or at least stop teaching well. At the end of the day, listen, we want to make sure you do a couple things. Number one, make sure you smash that subscribe button, then give that little left Italian hook. It's called Gancio Sinistro. It's left hook, bam, on that little old alert bell. Little Carmine come out, give you something, give you a pie, maybe even bring a little pizza, virtual pizza machine. I can't tell you what's going to pop out of that thing day to day. But anyways, and make sure, share this with your friends. All right. How do Italians really celebrate Christmas? Well, it has a lot to do really with just not the 25th. It can span, and Tony's going to talk to us about that today. Starts at December 8th, and it goes to January 6th. That's right. That's called the party, baby. Tony, welcome to the show. Welcome to Reason for Truth, brother.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate that.
Yeah, man. So Italians and food, it goes hand in hand. Tend to have a corner on that market. At least we feel we do. And, we talk about panettone and little pasta and antipasta and you name it, everything pasta, even drink pasta if we could. But, depending on the region you're from, right, Tony, it's gonna determine I guess when you eat, what you eat, really. But we talk about a little bit on the seven fishes. But how does this what is the span of an Italian Christmas? What does that look like?
Yeah, well, as you can imagine, Steve, food is definitely front and center. And like you said, they don't celebrate Christmas on a day, any one day. It lasts for almost a month. And, it could start off, depending on the region, but you could have anywhere from, 7 to 14 courses. And that's no exaggeration. Like you said, sometimes the Italians, depending on the region, but they'll do the 7 fishes. Yeah, so typically, Steve, Italian Christmas dinner, they'll start off with, a pasta plate, and then they'll have some kind of meat, whether it be chicken or sausage and peppers. And then, for cakes, they do what's called panettone, which just means Tony's bread, actually. And that's a classic.
That's
classic in Italy. Yep, that's me.
So the question is the bread named after Tony Casella, or is Tony Casella named after the Italian bread? You tell me.
That is a good question. The chicken or the egg?
You talked a little bit about what is that? I mean, is Christmas Day a big day? Do you open your gifts on Christmas Day, or is it kind of like an Italian version of Hanukkah where you open gifts throughout that period of time? That's about a month.
Yeah, the region where I come from, which is in the area of Naples, they mainly do it similar to how we do it in the States. They might do it for one day, but it could extend all the way up until the first week in January as well.
I mean, that's called the Christmas season. I think that's the solution to Christmas going too fast. That's really simmering it. How beautiful that is.
Right.
And that makes sense. And you had mentioned before that some of the regions, Italians do not eat meat on Christmas Eve, but they eat the 7 fishes. Not many people have heard about that. A lot of the more traditional Italians have. You said they kind of go to midnight mass for Christmas, but tell us about the seven fishes.
Yeah, it's not a tradition that my family does, but I know the farther south you go, in the area of Calabria, and I think even down into Sicily, they have the tradition of cooking 7 fishes, and it would just be 7 different kinds of fish cooked in all different styles.
Now, I'm not certain. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Steve. And the thought behind that is because they don't eat meat usually on Christmas Eve, and so they go for the fish, which represents, like a cleansing, a cleansing meal.
Yes, because I've heard there's some biblical meaning behind it, but I don't really know how that correlates. But that'd be an excellent thing. We should do an episode just on the 7 fishes. So stay tuned and make sure everybody out there subscribe so you don't miss the 7 fishes. You don't want to go hungry. Listen, I do know the midnight mass. I remember my first 18 years of my life, I never celebrated Christmas at home. Some people say, "Oh man, that's so sad." But man, I was talking to my sister. I said, "Tony, we always went to New York, and boy, it was festive, man, back in those days, 60s and 70s into the early 80s. But, we always went, whether we were in New York City or on Long Island with my grandmother, we always, quite often anyways, went to midnight mass. That's a big deal to the Italians. What is that a tradition? There's just some meaning in that. To me, it always seemed tradition.
Right. Yeah, it's a tradition. They've just been doing it for so long. It just kind of carried on over into today as well.
Now let's move on to Santa Claus. He's a good guy. Klaus, that sounds German to me, so maybe we could make our own version like, Santalini or something, but I'm being funny. Now, Italy has a Santa at the end of the season on January 6th. I think you mentioned before it's called La Befana, comes by to leave presents for the children. What is that about? Is that their version?
Right, yeah.
And is that their version of or Santa?
Right. Yeah, they do have Santa Claus as well. But La Befana, which just means the good witch in Italian, brings presents towards the end as well. So in the first week of January, you would get your presents from Santa, at Christmas time, and then you would get more presents from La Befana later on in the season.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Before people get upset, Tony and I realize that there's no such thing as a good witch, but it's tradition. And before people get too upset, remember, Santa Claus was a real figure, but Santa Claus doesn't fly around the world on a sleigh either. So it's tradition. You take it in terms of a context. I don't think Italians are worshiping witches. I think it's just kind of what they, it's something that was, I have no idea. It'd be another good, perhaps episode we should do, Tony, on La Befana. So, anyways, so you said before that she sweeps the floor, representing a new start or a clean slate in the new year.
Right. And according to the legend, and there's no historical basis for this as well, this is complete legend, but it goes that she was invited by the wise men to go with them to visit Jesus at his birth. And she declined because she had to do housework and she was sweeping the floor. And so that's why she had to decline the trip with the wise men.
Interesting. It shows you the folklore that each country, and by the way, each country, if you study it, right, Tony? I mean, I've looked at Germany has its, and if you look at Christmas in each culture, it exists in just about every culture, just about. What's interesting is that each one has really their own complete different story. So I do know, perhaps, by the way, that in witchcraft and Wicca, we have a whole video on that. We're having an educational video. It's going to be an Equipped. I know that EquippedAcademy.com is putting out, and it actually has me doing a talk on Wicca, witchcraft, and Satanism. The whole purpose, Tony, of in Wicca or witchcraft for the broom is to actually cleanse out the good spirits. I don't think Italy's looking at it that way. They're looking at it in the inverse. But modern New Age Wicca and witchcraft, people think the broom is something they fly around in. That's not something they create a circle. They write a circle, usually outdoors, and they sweep out the good spirits. But here it's something different, and so it's interesting. Good cultural deal. See, people are saying, man, you're putting down your own traditions. Well, we don't really, Tony and I really don't call on the witch here. We're just telling you what some of the folklore, which every single culture has. So anyways, we know Jesus is the reason for the season. His birth is what we celebrate. But according to legend, you were saying that, you're right, she was asked to join the wise men. Well, I wonder what the wise men would have to say about that. She was busy. She had to complete her housework. I love it. It's Italian. It's total Italian. Yeah, she's doing housework. She's got to get the house clean, man. Got to make something to eat. They also...
It reminds me of the story, Steve, of Mary and Martha.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Totally. Oh, my gosh. And you're like, listen, we got to talk about this. Jeez. They also set up what was called a ceppo, or is it a chepo, you said? CEPPO. It's a wooden frame, a few feet high. It's set up with a nativity set and other Christmas items. What is the chepo?
Right, yeah. So the chepo, typically it's a wooden frame, maybe just a few feet high, and on the bottom it will have a nativity scene. And yeah, like you said, other Christmas ornaments or sentimental items.
Interesting. So you put gifts down there?
They can put gifts down there, pictures. Yep.
Outside the house, inside the house, both? Either or?
Typically, near the fireplace, if there's a fireplace, typically it goes there. And usually a star goes on top as well.
Oh, nice. As I said, if you
Yeah.
put it outside, all the neighbors, that aren't Italian come around, maybe snack on your gifts. So you got to be careful. That's why you
Yeah.
do it inside here. And then, of course, there's the food. Depending on again what region you're from, you're saying, and obviously, we know the north they do white sauce, the south they do the red marinara sauce, which is king. In my house, certainly, the white sauce I've had it. I worked in an Italian restaurant called La Fiore, a Ristorante years ago, and when I was in my 20s, and they did what is it? What was it with the white sauce? I'm trying to think now. Not a it was a white sauce. I'll think of it, but boy,
Yeah.
heavy. I mean, I ate that and it was so delicious, but so cream filled, man. When I was done, I could have ate like 2 pounds of red, for what that did to my stomach. But hey, but I do like that ricotta cheese. I'm looking forward to your mom's ricotta cheese. I can't believe I'm having
Oh
raviolis
yeah,
at
that's
Tony's
coming up
house.
soon.
We're doing an episode on that, Tony.
Yep.
Jeez.
Yeah.
But
Is the sauce you're thinking of bechamel?
no, oh
Okay.
gosh, what they called it. It could have been what they call it. We had an Italian chef, and he was very accomplished.
Okay.
Oh gosh, not the Marsala. Marsala I love with the Marsala wine. It's my mom's family's from the Marsala region down in Sicily.
Oh, yep.
But yeah, the food, depending on what region you're from, I guess you find what on the table. I mean, ravioli, lasagna, gnocchi, lamb, chicken sausage, everything. We did a lot of stuffed peppers. My grandmother would do like peppers and onions and then it was all Italian done. I don't even know how she did it in olive oil. Oh my gosh, it was delivered. And my grandmother always did the Sicilian deep dish pizza. Now, in my current age, I couldn't really partake in that, but that bad boy, man, we'd get there. We'd get in at 1 a.m, Tony, sometimes because it was 6-7 hour ride. And grandma, man, she, no, don't know, we're eating, grandma, and it doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. I mean, 1 o'clock in the morning, out comes, you think it's a buffet or something at a restaurant. And then you have to eat it because you can't walk by about pizza. It's a 24-hour thing. But where are your families from? What you get? You said that ravioli is key, huh? Is that a big deal in where you're from?
Yep. It's it's a staple in the area that my family is from, and my aunt Lena makes them homemade. Makes the ricotta cheese homemade and the actual ravioli themselves.
You have an Aunt
Yep.
Lena. I have an
Aunt
Aunt
Lena.
Lena.
Yep.
Oh, and Uncle Angelo. I love them. I spent a lot of time with them. Aunt Lena and Uncle Angelo. I call them, by the way, not to digress too much, but you got to hear this one. I call him Uncle Nickel. When as a little boy, he would sit. I remember he had a mustache. I mean, he was something right out of The Godfather. He was awesome, though. And he'd sit there, in the old timers, they would wear black shoes, a nice dress, always, and slacks. I never saw them in jeans. And he would go and reach in his pocket, Tony, and he would get nickels, and then he'd flick them, and I'd be like, Uncle Nickel, I call him Uncle Nickel. I nicknamed him Uncle Nickel, Uncle
Yeah.
Angelo. And then he run out of nickels, he'd do pennies, and sometimes I got a quarter. That was big, man. I scored big with
That's
quarters. But anyways, yeah, so ravioli, so you said in your region, tiramisu was king, right?
Tiramisu, and also I should mention, I just remembered we were talking about the midnight mass. After the mass, which might end around 1 o'clock in the morning, everyone comes back to the house, and I'm speaking of my family,
Okay.
and they have another meal, and they'll have actually a quite a heavy meal at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Wow, no kidding.
Yep.
Like it's kind of like being on a cruise, man, the midnight buffet.
Yep.
Boy, I guess
Yep.
you're up. I was up last night till midnight at some friend's house. Italian guy and a Jewish guy. He was a Messianic Jew, Christ believing Jew. And man, I had to peel myself out of there. These guys are in their 70s. They're almost 80 years old, and they were outdoing me. We're sitting here eating 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. I'm thinking, man, I usually eat, I'm on that diet where I'm done by 3. It's like an anti-Italian meal. It's like, your last meal of the day, and then it's the intermittent. But, oh, gosh. What is tiramisu? Explain for our listeners and our watchers, what is tiramisu?
Yeah, so tiramisu is just a cold dessert. It's made with ladyfingers that have been soaked in espresso coffee, and then it's kind of filled with like a cream cheese type filling.
Anything soaked in espresso is good. In the
Exactly.
South, Tony, they really do. There's places in the South where they deep fry Twinkies. So there's something to be said about this tiramisu. Anyways, I'll take the tiramisu. I don't think I'm in for the fried Twinkies, but it's got to be like a heart attack waiting. Well, wonderful. What other things do you guys do, on the Casella household? And anything in particular in closing?
Yeah, so the one thing we do is we play a board game that's become tradition, for over, goodness, 40 years. We play a game similar to the American game Bingo, but this game
Okay.
is called Tombola. And the concept is quite similar. You have a card with numbers on it, and you have to fill up those numbers first. And it's a very fun game. It's really entertaining.
It's funny. Oh my gosh. We grew up, and it's a thing on Christmas. We play bingo. That's what we do. That is funny how
Oh
you
wow,
say that. It is to this
that's
day.
wow.
Yeah. It's no other game. That is the game.
Yep.
But you know what? Can you teach me how to play Tombola?
Yeah, we have a set here. When you come up, we'll play a game.
All right. I may, you know what, I may get one because the family's gathering this year. I may have to get one, and you may have to talk me through getting started. Is it similar to bingo? Can you play similar? Is it easy to learn?
Very, very similar, almost identical
Okay.
to Bingo, just a little different setup. But yeah, if you can play Bingo, you can play Tombola.
Okay. That's it,
Yep,
man. Going on Amazon. Just to boom, get it here in
yep,
2 days. Well, I
yep.
appreciate it. That's my good bud. Tony and I, we not only share the love of Jesus Christ deeply, but we also share Italian heritage, and that always bonds us deeply. So God's blessings. Tony, thank you for joining us. Matter of fact, we got a couple more Casella episodes coming up. Tony and I are going to be talking about New Year's Eve and New Year's Eve resolutions, and just really what an Italian Christmas looks like. Not just an Italian Christmas. We want to talk about really what is the meaning of Christmas from a biblical perspective, not just an Italian perspective. Tony, thank you for being with us today, brother.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Always an honor. Listen, thank you all for watching. Couple things. We have some other cool episodes. I'll put a link for at least one of them down below. Make sure you, again, man, subscribe. Get the Gonzalo Sinistro. Bam. Give it a little Carmine left hook and that alert bell down there. Listen, if you're listening here on podcast, make sure you give us a high rating. That'll really help spread the gospel. Doesn't cost anything, and maybe a little review. Keep us going strong. And once upon a time, there was a day, Tony, we were one of the top downloaded conservative iTunes conservative programs years ago. My buddy in D.C. called me and told me that. And, since then, a lot of programs with larger budgets came. So listen, we don't have that quite large budget. So anybody who would do that for us would be appreciated. God's blessings to you. Listen, depending on when we air this, may you have a very Merry Christmas season. Spread it out over the month. Enjoy your times with family, food, little tiramisu. If you don't make tiramisu, listen, go over to the store, get yourself some. But go to the Italian place, the real Italian place, not like the supermarket. Go down there, find the little Italian market. I'm sure they got something for you. God's blessings to you. Man, this is Stevie Garofalo, your host with my good bud and co-host here, Tony Casella. This is your Reason for Truth, Italian Reason for Truth for today.